Welcome back to Gun&ShotTV, and today I was going to talk about the Ruger Mini 14. Um, I'm not a huge AR fan, not that the AR is a bad system, it just for some reason visually didn't appeal to me. So I did want a gun that would shoot 223 or 556 because that is the cheapest centerfire rifle cartridge you're really going to get. So um, after much looking around, I found a pretty good deal on a new in box stainless and wood, which is the color combo that I wanted, Ruger Mini 14. And these guns have been around since the 70s, and they have a pretty bad reputation. And I don't know that it's necessarily true or false. The early guns, I think, were decent, and they were definitely cheap. And towards the 80s and 90s, I think they had just made so many guns on the tooling that the tooling was getting worn out. And the barrels were not, I believe they were made by a third party, and they were very thin and had some harmonics issues. So they weren't the most accurate guns, but they were very cheap. And especially back in the early days of the Mini 14, M16s were new as well. The AR, was a competing design that at the time, mags and everything were harder to find and they were much more expensive. So especially back in the day, like this was a very good value. And then, like I said, in the 80s and 90s, I think there was some wear on the tooling and the guns weren't quite as nice. But Ruger designed this more as a hunting and a ranch rifle. Throw it in your pickup and pick off a coyote at the edge of your fence, stuff like that. It wasn't meant to be a sniper rifle. It wasn't meant to be a bullseye rifle, anything like that. So it has what I like to call the rock and chop mag release, similar to an AK, where you push the release, rock it forward, rock it backward, charge your rifle, and now you are ready to chop, if you will. So this is a 20-round Ruger magazine. I know there was a period when Bill Ruger himself felt that people shouldn't have extended magazines. He had a famous quote about no true sportsman and all this stuff. Ruger's dead. The company has moved on. You can now get 20, 30-round magazines from Ruger. There's no problem. But a pretty interesting design, kind of a scaled down M1 Garand M14 style of action with the rotating bolt. And I think it's pretty neat. The bolt in theory rotates and slings any dirt and mud off. I've had awesome service with mine. When it was new, I did have some misfeeds for the first magazine. Now, it had been sitting new in the box. I didn't lubricate it. I didn't do anything to it. And the first mag, I had some jams, some failure to extract. After a magazine, it's fired flawlessly. I've never had anything hang up. I shoot exclusively steel case, Wolf, Tula, Herders, garbage ammo. I've never had a problem with this rifle. So that's one of those things. I wouldn't really say that it's a bad gun. This is the newer series, so that's a 580. I think this is actually 581. But around 2000, they retooled and went to a newer set of dies. So all the new tooling makes a tighter receiver. They also switched to what's called a shouldered barrel. It's a thicker barrel that has a thicker shoulder here. The original barrel they call pencil barrels because there's no taper here. It is just one straight smaller barrel size. So, and this also has integrated scope ring bases if you want to put an optic on it. So I would say this is, the best of the 580 and the 581 series are definitely the best. So, maybe that's tempering my view a little bit and that the earlier ones were that bad. But it's a neat design. It's pretty simple to take apart. You've got your trigger guard here, and you can put pretty much anything in that trigger guard and pry it a little bit, and broke my screwdriver. So your action comes out, or not your action, your trigger pack, essentially. Your stock lifts off, and then you can get everything out. You just pull the spring, and the op rod comes off. The bolt will come out when you pop out the bolt stop there. But pretty simple to work on. The beauty of the system, I try to do this without throwing stuff everywhere, is every time it fires, the gas shoots out of this valve or port or whatever you want to call it. into a hole in the operating rod. Once it goes this far back, it's just venting through the handguard. Now it does get dirty, but it pretty much will self-clean because it's got a lot of mass sliding back and forth, and all that gas is also pushing all that carbon out. So they don't really bind up. You don't really need to clean them. I keep my guns clean just because that's how I am. But really, it's a pretty reliable design. You know, everybody that's all, oh, ARs are great and everything, a lot of people are switching to piston-style ARs just because of that fact, whereas the direct impingement system shoots that gas back in your action, and then you've got to clean that out. So either way, pretty decent design. I really like mine. Like I said, it's not that the ARs are bad. I just personally enjoy that stock, that M1 carbine, you know, M1 Garand type action. I just think it's a cool gun. Now, for magazines, like I said, you can get Ruger OEM mags. They're pretty common. These are 2 20-round Ruger mags. Obviously, these have ammo in them. This is a gun shop bargain box find, and it's kind of weird because it looks like a Ruger mag. It says Ruger on it, but it doesn't have any other stamping on it besides Ruger. So I looked around because the base plate isn't right. The base plate has 4 little spring pins to hold it on. And that's not normal for a Mini 14 mag. So I did a little bit of looking online, and apparently when the Mini 14 first came out, they also had a Select Fire version. Now the Select Fire version, I believe, is still for sale maybe to military and police forces, but it was for sale on the public market before the machine gun registry closed. And it was a decent seller to law enforcement before the AR platform really took over. So they had a Select Fire switch on the back of the action here. And you'll see in movies, these are very common, like Starship Troopers, all those movies use those AC556 is what it was called, actions in their prop guns because they function very well and they're full auto. So what they did was they had 30-round magazines, and for whatever reason, to make 20-round magazines for the AC556, they cut those down into 20-round magazines. And I guess the 20-round restriction was to keep the gun from overheating or for whatever reason. So they decided to cut those mags down and came up with this follower that uses pins and springs. Now, I guess these are very collectible. They're like 50, 60 bucks. I found it, like I said, in a junk mag bin at a gun shop for 10 bucks or 5 bucks or something, in with a bunch of other junk mags. Because one thing that's very common you'll see for Ruger Mini 14s is junk mags. Now, these are all junk, cheap copy mags. Now, I've actually had awesome luck. I've had all these mags function fine in my rifle. A lot of people have a lot of problems with aftermarket mags because in the 80s and 70s and all the way up until the 90s, I believe, when Ruger started changing and then Bill Ruger died, and now you can get full-size, high-capacity mags from Ruger. You couldn't buy them direct from Ruger as a member of the general public. They were restricted to law enforcement only. So there were a lot of these companies that would make cheap stamp mags, and they usually don't even have a maker on them, but you can see how it's got the hole in the front to lock in the Mini 14, and it's got this narrowed section in the front. So that'll kind of set it apart. And these are, you know, maybe worth 5, 10 bucks. Like this one I bought was new in the bag. It's like a Pro Mag or something. I bought it mainly because it was shiny and it would match. If I ever decided to go as one of the A-Team for Halloween, figured maybe we could deck this out A-Team style. But anyways, so you'll see these are shit mags. Like I said, I would not recommend any of these unless you know your gun is not picky on mags. This is an interesting mag. This was made by Ramline, and it is a 30-round Mini 14 or AR-15 magazine. It will actually fit in either and function in either. And I've got 2 of these, and I've had awesome luck with them. Like I said, my gun is not picky at all on magazines, so I don't know. Some people have tons of problems. I don't. I even have this 40-round generic shitbox mag, and it functions flawlessly. So I don't know. I might have just had the magical gun. I'm not sure. And, you know, it's another thing, too. Ruger kind of designed these to be a little bit overgassed. You'll see when you shoot these, I'm talking shooting steel cased junk ammo. It'll throw the cases, what should be underpowered. It'll throw them 20 feet, 25 feet behind you and 10, 15 feet in the air sometimes. So like when I shoot this on my deck, it's pelting the house and bouncing off the windows, and I'll find a bunch of cases up in the gutter. I mean, they really designed it to pretty much run on anything and be pretty durable and not picky on ammo. So it's just one of those, if your action has everything in the right place that mags generally lock in right, you shouldn't really have any problems, especially with the newer 580 or 581 series. But like I said, these guns now they're getting up in price. I think they're 600 to 800 bucks maybe new. At that price, is it better to just get a $500 AR? I'm not going to say it's not, because well, I like the gun and I bought it for my own reasons. ARs are now cheaper, so I don't know that I would necessarily say, oh, you should buy a gun that's more expensive and takes harder to find more expensive magazines. That's definitely not necessarily something I would recommend. But like I said, I think the big thing with the price increase was they did change the tooling around 2000 to get better receivers and better barrels and everything. So it's a trade-off, and I think it is a better gun than what you were getting at those, $200-300 gun show specials back in the 90s. So, but either way, and they also make a version that's in 7.62 by 39 called the Mini 30, and they're coming out with a new one that I believe is in 300 blackout, I think, or one of the new designer cartridges for suppressed shooting. So they're definitely neat guns, and like I said, really flexible and handy. So if it's something you like, you see all kinds of people on the internet that are like, oh, they're pieces of shit, don't buy one, all this stuff. I think if you get a 580 or 581 series, which is the numbers at the start of the serial number, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I think they're very good guns. And the other cool thing is this Ruger will stand behind you. When I bought this gun, it was new in the box. It was missing the scope rings and the magazine. I knew that. I called Ruger and I said, I bought this gun new in the box. It was missing some stuff. Is there, can I get a deal on buying the magazine and the scope rings from you? So I talked to the lady, and the customer service rep was super nice. She's like, well, why were they missing? I said, I don't know. The gun dealer said they weren't in the box, and I got a deal on the gun. And she said, well, let me take care of it. So she took care of me, and she actually got me the stuff. So, that was like one of the first experiences I had with Ruger customer service, and they really took care of me. So I've been really happy with this gun. I've shot it quite a bit. Like I said, no issues. So if you're thinking about one, do your homework. Look around. There's tons of reviews. I know the one guy, Nut and Fancy, that has a pretty active YouTube channel. I think he shoots a lot of Mini 14 videos, and I know he's got one or two of them. There's also a pretty much a separate forum. I think it's called like Perfect Union or Perfect Circle or something like that. That pretty much is Mini 14 centric. So if you want some information from people that actually have them, that's a good place to look. I know I found some info there that was pretty good. But this is probably getting a little too long, so I'm going to cut it short. But if you have any questions or want some more information, make sure you like and comment, and I'll get back to you with whatever information I can find or do a little looking for you. But for Gun and Shot TV, this is Chris saying thanks for watching. Have a great day.